Okay, so we're talking about, thank you everybody for all your help. Our topic tonight is the Bodhicaryavatara, or the way of the Bodhisattva. Yeah. And this text comes to us from ancient times, India. Shantideva was connected with Nalanda University. This was late 600s, like 685, I think he was born, and then he lived into the 700s, or the 8th century. And he was quite the figure there at Nalanda. There's this story that he was there with the monks, and that he was perceived by the other monks as being very kind of lackadaisical and not always showing up to the lectures, and basically like resting or sleeping a lot, and so they really didn't think very much of this guy. He didn't impress them at all. And so they sort of conspired amongst themselves, because the deal was, I think every week, somebody had to come forward and give a teaching, right? And say, okay, well, we'll have Shantideva give the teaching next week. And so they're chuckling to themselves, thinking this would be a great opportunity to embarrass him and such. And so when the time comes to teach, he asks them, well, do you want me to teach something from tradition, from a traditional text, or do you want me to teach something new? And they say, oh, it'd be great if you taught something new. And they're still kind of chuckling to themselves, like, it's yokel, So anyway, he then imparts from the teaching throne this original poem that has come down as the Bodhicaryavatara. And there's a particular verse in the 9th chapter which is concerned with transcendent wisdom. And it reads something like this: when that which is real and non-real both are absent from the mind, nothing else remains for the mind to do but rest in perfect peace from concepts free. And it's at the time that he got to this verse, as depicted in the art tanka here, he begins to levitate, right? And he continues to levitate as he continues to recite his text, till finally he disappears in the sky, and all the people that were there, all they could do is hear his voice from the sky as he completed the text. So this is a pivotal verse. It's kind of advanced ideas, but basically, we have sort of our ordinary notions of day-to-day reality, and we think all of this is very real. And the Mahayana teachings of Buddhism and Tibetan Buddhism, they come along and say, well, maybe not as real as you think.
Excuse me, Mark.
Yes.
There was a note here saying that you're having trouble hearing, and your voice is a little bit muddled, and I'm wondering.
No, we're not using that. We're using
not using this at all. So can you make the mic a little closer to you?
I can bring this device closer, and I can speak towards it. I suppose that would help. And not. Well, anyway, I hope this is better.
It might be them. Your voice is coming very clear. It might be on their end.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. So anyway, Shantideva, unlike me, he ascends into the sky. And anyway, this text comes down to us through the centuries. It has 10 chapters. And there's this prayer, and in our Nyingma tradition, let's see, the teaching tradition of the Bodhicaryavatara was completely sort of revitalized in our Tibetan Nyingma tradition in the 19th century, so really, over a millennia later, by Patrul Rinpoche, who taught the Bodhicaryavatara constantly. He carried a copy. He didn't have very many possessions. He had his robe, he had his begging bowl, and he had his copy of the Bodhicaryavatara, and he wandered all over Eastern Tibet, teaching this text to monasteries and great assemblies, and sometimes just one-on-one. And the way the text is structured, it's in 10 chapters, and the way Patrul Rinpoche talks about it is consistent with this famous prayer, which says, "O precious sublime bodhicitta," or this mind of awakening, "may it arise in those in whom it has not arisen, may it never decline where it has arisen, and may it go on increasing further and further." And so the first 9 chapters, according to Patrul Rinpoche, are about giving rise to bodhicitta where it hasn't been before. And so what are we talking about? We're talking about bodhicitta, which is a very unique, rare, precious mindset, to the extent that, if you haven't noticed, most of our thoughts and emotions are entirely self-centered. 99% of our thoughts are self-absorbed. And bodhicitta is like totally turns all of that on its head, right? It is, and when we're talking here in aspiration, the wish to become fully awakened or to become a Buddha ourselves for the benefit of all sentient beings. So instead of putting the self's interest first, it's the interest of everybody else is put to the forefront. So it's not a default thought, right? Right? Our habitual thoughts, like I say, are all self-centered. Bodhicitta is not that way. The only sort of exceptions to the rules that you see sometimes are like mothers. Mothers take, they will sacrifice anything for their little babies. That's like the only one of the few exceptions to the general rule that all thoughts are self-centered. But this bodhicitta idea is really radical, right? And so the prayer is that may it arise where it has not arisen and never decline where it has, and that goes on increasing further and further. And so the first 3 chapters, according to Patrul Rinpoche's way of teaching, concern this first notion of giving rise to bodhicitta where it has not arisen before. And then this chapters 4, 5, and 6 are to sustain bodhicitta and protect bodhicitta, because it's, like I say, it's a very unusual and rare and precious thing. And then the 3 chapters, 7, 8, and 9, cause it to increase further and further. And then the 10th and final chapter is the dedication of merit. So, as I was saying earlier, this bodhicitta, citta in Sanskrit means like mind, basically. And bodhi is this idea of awakening. It's like Buddha, it's similar word form. And so it is this awakening of this really unique and very special mindset or attitude, where everything one does as the bodhicitta, or as a bodhisattva, the one who holds this bodhicitta in mind, is done for the benefit of all sentient beings, or for others, basically. And it is a very firm, as it develops, and we move into bodhisattva vow. This wish to become enlightened for the benefit of all beings becomes very strong and resolute. So I think I already talked about this. Yeah, so the first 3 chapters, okay, talk about bodhicitta, where they have not arisen. And in that context, we get the first chapter, which is about the benefits of bodhicitta. It's really very sort of inspiring. How rare and precious this mindset is. He talks about how rare it is to have a human form, right? The rarity of human birth. We could be an insect, or a whale, or a giraffe, or something, but we have human birth, and that's very rare. But then even within, and that's super rare, but then even more rare than that is that we have a mind that is fully capable and functioning, but that it actually elevates to this level, right? Where it elevates to this level of this wish to become fully awakened, just like the Buddha, for the benefit of all sentient beings. And that's just incredibly rare. And then the second chapter is recognizing that, oh dear, up until this point, we have been self-centered, right? And is a chapter all about confession of all of our self-centered negative actions from beginning this time. and any kind of thoughts or actions that are not conducive to this bodhicitta. And then the third is about the full commitment, or like I say, the Bodhisattva vow. The fourth chapter, fourth, fifth, and sixth, where we're protecting this or sustaining this bodhicitta and not letting it to decline, is, well, first of all, there's the fourth chapter that talks about carefulness. And it's about mindfulness and carefulness. And this is to be very alert and, with one's actions of body and your actions of speech and your actions of mind. And as much as possible, conforming all of our actions towards the positive, and to relinquish negative actions. Negative actions in the Buddhist context are anything that causes harm to ourselves or to others. And then there's carefulness is a combination of mindfulness and remembering and carefulness that becomes all pervasive. That is to say, from the very time you wake up in the morning till there's one practice that Rinpoche gives where you wake up in the morning and you say, okay, this morning, today, I'm going to practice bodhicitta to the best of my ability all day long. Right? And then you get to the end of the day and you look back at all of your actions across the day, and you identify those which were consistent with bodhicitta and those which were not. And those which were not, you confess and you acknowledge and you say, I'll do better next time. So it's an ongoing mind training process of this carefulness and mindfulness. And then also the third leg of the tripod is this notion of what we're translated here as vigilant awareness. This the traditional image is like of a sentry, on the castle, up on the battlements of the castle, and the sentry is looking out, he's keeping watch, to see if there's any enemies approaching, the castle. And so he's very watchful, right? And here that sort of image is brought to mind in terms of our cultivation of a real sharp awareness of where's our mind going, moment by moment, is it slipping off into negativities and negative emotionality, and as much as possible to catch it and cut off any negativity before it begins to snowball. And then the sixth chapter on this middle section of sustaining bodhicitta is that of patient endurance. And this chapter, the patience chapter, maybe of all of the 10 chapters in the Bodhicaryavatara, is the most practical for us. Unless your mind stream is utterly purified such that you no longer have any anger. Yeah? If you still have any anger in your mind stream, ever, like me getting frustrated with all of this technology just before we started this talk, oh my God, then we need to cultivate patience, to overcome that negativity, to be able to catch it before it gets out of control. And so there's lots and lots of teachings that Shantideva gives there. And I've talked in Sunday talks before about overcoming anger using the techniques in the patience chapter. Perhaps the most useful one, there's many things, but one of which is to know or to recognize that just as how our actions are, that we are impelled, to act out in various ways, that other people, the aggravating ones, they're not free agents either. They are being compelled by their emotional makeup and their karma to act out in the way that they are acting out. And to be able to kind of discern and dissect, in the sense that there's the person over there, the aggravating one, the troublemaker person, the one who's driving you crazy, the one who's making you really angry, and to recognize that that's not really them. You know, they're not the issue. The issue is their emotional stuff that's been activated, and now for whatever reason is being directed at you, right? And you're into this like argumentative, negative, angry. I don't know. Maybe one of you is throwing dishes onto the floor of the kitchen, you know, or something, or slamming the door behind you as you walk away, or they do that and you're left in the kitchen and they slam the door and walk away. Well, you know these things, you've been there. And so it's very helpful to recognize, well, it's not Sally, you know, it's these emotional disturbances that have just happened to come up in her mind stream at this time. And just like I am, you know, being impelled, you know, that she is being impelled too. And what that sort of thing does is that it just begins to create a little more sympathetic understanding, and maybe even, you know, the growth of compassion for the two of you, right, that are caught up in that, you know, head-to-head deal, right, is that this is not your best side. It's not their best side either, you know. And to, like I say, sort of isolate what's going on the emotional side can really help diffuse things and be able to move things forward. Anyway, it's a long chapter. It's the most helpful, in my opinion, most practical of all of these. And then you get the third set of 3 chapters, 7, 8, and 9, which is this idea of making bodhicitta really, you know, go big, you know, go galactic. And these chapters concern diligent effort, which is imbued with a sense of joy. You know, this is not drudgery, but there's a real strong wish to engage in the cultivation and the development of bodhicitta more and more. And then also the moving into deeper and deeper or higher and higher levels of meditative concentration, and better meditation, stronger meditation, which lays the groundwork for the transcendent insight, or the higher insight of prajna, this transcendent wisdom, which is the subject of the 9th chapter. And then we get the 10th chapter, which is this beautiful poem of dedication of merit. You know, it's, well, maybe I'll have a chance to read from some of it if we have time. Let's see. So where does this bodhicitta come from? You know, it just doesn't like, it's not transplant. Well, it is transmissible. It can be transplanted, but otherwise we wouldn't have a lineage. But its fertile ground is the cultivation of love and the cultivation of compassion. And it is from that loving kindness and compassion qualities being developed. Then on top of that, or sort of the flowering of that, comes the bodhicitta, which then is this resolve. So once the compassion is fully activated, and where's the compassion coming from? Well, it's coming from profound insight into the Buddha's first noble truth, that is to say, the truth of suffering, which is all pervasive. And it is from that insight that comes this mahakaruna, or great compassion. And then on top of that, once we see how horrible the suffering is, both physical and mental, and how that is all pervasive in everyone you meet, and the billions of people you will never meet will all go through similar kinds of pain and suffering that you've gone through. And when that really settles in, then there's this, that's like the groundwork for this arising of bodhicitta, which is for the sake of others to attain the full awakening of a Buddha, so then we can genuinely be of help to others. Yeah, love, compassion, bodhicitta. And then when we talk about, once we get into the bodhicitta space, which is a lot to get there, right? That's very, very quite amazing. The first one is, there's two aspects. There's the relative bodhicitta, you know, subject object, regular interactions, you know, I'm here, you're there, whatever. And here the object of the compassion is not just limited to, you know, your partner or your parents, your family, but it's extended to all sentient beings. Yeah, really vast. We say, you know, there's karuna, there's compassion, and then there's mahakaruna, or great compassion, right? The great aspect is that it's like the focus of it is all sentient beings. Like I say, everyone you've met and all the billions of people you will never meet, all of those people. All of those beings, not even just human beings, but animals, any form of sentient life, is the object of this great compassion. Yeah? And this wish, the love is the wish that everybody be happy. The compassion is the wish that everybody be free from suffering, right? And this is and so there's many meditations and contemplations, and you know, some of you know, I see some people who, like Michael, who has been in the morning practice class, you know, this is something we have to train in again and again and again, right? To, you know, we don't have. Yeah, love and compassion. It's so easy to say, but to cultivate it intentionally is really sort of like a prerequisite. You know, for bodhicitta doesn't go, it doesn't take off, you know, until the love and compassion has really been developed. But then at any rate, this is still on the sort of relative level. That is to say, us and them, me and you. Then there's a whole nother level of bodhicitta, or what we call the absolute level, or aspect. And here, the focus is complete enlightenment, or complete liberation from suffering, and the full omniscience of the Buddha. And this is, in Tibetan we say mikmed, there is no object. It has, or another way to put it is it is non-dual, right? And it's at this level that you start to see this text and other texts start talking about how all phenomena are, you know, like a dream, or like a cloud land, or like a rainbow, or like a image on a surface of a mirror. That is to say that it's not like real, right? And so this is like when that first verse that I was talking about, where he starts elevating into the sky, that's where this is beginning to come into play, where yes, there's the relative, there's the appearance, everything appears, phenomena, other people, you guys, me, we all appear, but the teachings, the wisdom teachings come along and say, but yes, and but no, that they appear, but they have no self-nature. They have, there's nothing there. And then that verse comes along and says, well, okay, there's the normal way that says everything's real, and then there's this other way that's saying, well, everything's like a dream. But then it says, and then beyond that, when you have neither of those two conceptual constructs operational, then mind comes completely to peace. And if you're like Shantideva, you elevate up into the sky. Right? So anyway, this is relative and bodhi and absolute bodhicitta. So this is some people, presumably they say, traditionally they say, that some people are more amenable to this kind of training because they've been doing so in prior lifetimes, right? And they're just kind of bodhisattvas from before, and they're just sort of picking up where they left off, right? But the rest of us, you know, we have to go kind of step by step, and moving out of our usual pattern of thinking, and gradually, step by step, like I say, moving into this attitude of cherishing others, equally to ourselves, or perhaps even more than ourselves. Yeah? And well, how in the world do we do that? This is where the 9th chapter on transcendent wisdom comes in, and this ultimate bodhicitta comes in with this wisdom insight that everything that is arising, ourselves included, is arising dependently, what they call dependent origination. Everything is dependent. It's like a network or a web, yeah, of causes and conditions that are causing things to arise, to appear. You know, we always think now that we're big grown-up people that, you know, we're independent actors, but we're totally dependent. If there wasn't mommy and daddy, we would not be here, right? I mean, we are dependent original, or we have arisen due to dependent origination, right? We don't arise of our own self-power, right? And this takes this, and Shantideva and the others of this middle way approach take this more and more to the point where one realizes that nothing has any intrinsic self-nature, that everything is dependently arisen. And that can lead, that kind of analysis can lead to a very kind of special experience where one falls away, that one's sense of being a subject vanishes. Yeah. And similarly, the reality of phenomena vanishes, and mind opens. Mind relaxes and opens into this wisdom quality that realizes what they call shunyata, or this openness quality, empty quality of all appearance, and the emergence of this wide open luminosity. Yeah. We are beginning to approach Buddha level when these things start to happen. Yeah. So how in the world do little old people like us move from being little old people like us, you know, to this bodhisattva level, right? So that again, this goes in a step-by-step, traditionally step-by-step manner. This acquisition of this transcendent wisdom traditionally comes in, there's a threefold process that is described. One is to listen to teachings, you know, and that's what you're doing now, right? Maybe the speaker's not so great, but at least you're listening, and that's huge, actually, to actually listen to, oh, there's something beyond me, actually, really? Yeah. You know, there's bodhicitta, you know, completely beyond my self-centeredness. You know, you actually have to hear that. You know, reading is okay. Reading is okay, but it's much more effective if you hear it. And so traditionally, and in the way the teachings are presented traditionally, it's all done by a verbal presentation. And then the second step, a phase of this development of wisdom, is to reflect on these teachings, like really mull them over and challenge them and doubt. You know, this is where you raise questions, right, with yourself or with teachers, to really hash this stuff out. And then you get like totally decisive about it once you know, and that's a process, right? And because we all have our doubts about everything, and you have to go through all that. But once you cut through all that, then the third phase kicks in, which is the actual meditation, actual making this a lived experience of coming into this, the experience of selflessness and ultimately the full realization of it. And so, like I say, there's this threefold process, right, step by step, of moving into this higher realization. Yeah. And it takes time and it takes effort, but it's very good, right? And then as we grow more and more familiar with this way of perceiving and thinking, then it kind of, at some point, it kind of takes over. It has sort of an inner momentum to it, because you're approaching the way things truly are. Yeah. That the self-centeredness thing is actually kind of in the nature of an unfortunate mistake, and that it actually is not fundamental, that the fundamental nature of reality and our being as human beings is this wide open selflessness, this great compassion, and openness quality and luminosity quality, that this is the fundamental aspect of our being. Yeah. And so the way they talk about it here at the bottom, I say open luminosity or shunyata, of which compassion is the very essence or core. And that's like the real breakthrough, right? And it's like everything is working together in the Mahayana training, if you will. The compassion is developed, the love and compassion is developing stronger and stronger. The cultivation of wisdom is happening simultaneously, listening to teachings, reflecting on them, meditation, going deeper and deeper into the nature of selflessness. And gradually, it just opens out completely. Yeah. And this is the dawning of ultimate bodhicitta, or absolute bodhicitta, this union of wide openness and compassion. But then you're not done. Right? After that, you practice the ongoing trainings of the Bodhisattva in these 6 transcendent functions, all of which ideally are informed by this wisdom of selflessness. And these are the trainings in generosity, making offerings to Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, and making offerings to people who are less fortunate than ourselves. Again, opening up, right? And then this focus on the second paramita of moral discipline, being more and more in control of our mind, and this expresses itself as a ever more refined morality and concern for others, and not causing any pain. And then this cultivation of patience, patient endurance, and this diligent effort and meditation, and on it goes, and so that it increases further and further. And this whole bodhisattva career that we're going through here goes through various stages, and sometimes they talk about 10 stages, sometimes 13 stages, sometimes 16 stages, but then eventually you go through, you mature and mature, you open up more and more, and ultimately there's light everywhere, and it's true and complete enlightenment, and you have become a Buddha yourself. Yay. Right? Yeah. Except at that point, I think your hand passes right through your body. So anyway, this is a very quick flyby of the 10 chapters of the Bodhisattva Charyavatara. And so Hugh Joswick and I are going to take on, we're tackling this thing this summer, in another week or so. We'll start, and so we'll have a morning, just like we did with Path of Heroes the last 2 terms. In the summer term, I'm going to be leading a morning practice deal for 45 minutes in the morning. Well, we'll be engaging in these kind of bodhicitta practices, and then we'll have the Tuesday evening classes that you and I will be making our way through the entirety of the text. And even though, and that may seem like a lot, that's 8 weeks, is nothing, actually. The Bodhicaryavatara, particularly the 9th chapter on transcendent wisdom, well, there's one great master in the Tibetan tradition, and he would teach the Bodhicaryavatara 10 chapters, and he would cycle back and teach it again, and he taught it again and again his entire adult teaching life. That's all he taught. And the Bodhicaryavatara, if you look at our one of our textbooks here at the Institute called Ways of Enlightenment, there in the 19th century, there was, in Tibet, Eastern Tibet, there was this effort to kind of go back to the roots of the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, and Khenpo Shenga in particular, he identified 13 great texts that everybody should know in Buddhism, and then as it relates to the sutras, and the Bodhicaryavatara figures prominently among those 13 texts. And then on top of that, there's all of the whole Vajrayana, there's the whole Tantra, all of that wonderful, amazing stuff. But that these foundational teachings, these fundamental teachings of the Mahayana are just crucial to a full engagement with the tradition. That is to say, a real deep engagement with the Mahayana sutras. And then building on top of that comes the Vajrayana practice, preliminary practices or Nundro, and the Vajrayana practices of the development stage and completion stage practices, and then ultimately the Hatha Yoga or Dzogchen teachings, which are the unique province of the Nyingma tradition. But none of that really works, or doesn't work as it should, unless we really have come to this really revolutionary change of heart and revision or turning of the mind away from self-centered concerns and always, as much as possible, turning again and again to being for concern and care for the welfare of others. This increasingly great deeper and deeper compassion, combined with this extraordinary transcendent insight into the selflessness of self and other and all phenomena. Then it's like your genuine Mahayana, right? And then all of the practices thereafter of mantra recitation and visualization and subtle inner body stuff, all that stuff is great. But this is like really basic. But it's not basic for us. Not at all, right? But it's interesting, how Buddhism has been introduced in the West, and many people have just kind of like skipped this part, right, and just gone straight off into Dzogchen teachings or Vajrayana teachings or something. And Rinpoche has been very, Charlie Rinpoche, our founder here, has been saying, oh, no. I really want you guys to focus on these foundational Mahayana teachings, and that's why so much effort went into Path of Heroes and all of the practices in the back that pertain to this kind of material. Questions?
I think we need the mic so that people on the screen can hear.
Oh.
Hello?
No, I don't think you just talk into this thing.
Hello?
Dear, we're using the knee. We're not using that. So just speak up loudly if you have a question, or I will repeat the question.
Okay.
Yes.
So, how does one, in relation to developing relative bodhicitta, how does one not become striving? Because sometimes like the practices of relative bodhicitta strike me as like striving, or like, I know when I first started hearing the teachings, I felt like, oh, I must practice compassion. I need to do this, and I really have to. And then I kind of had a conflict in myself because I felt like it was a little dogmatic. And so my question is, how does one practice relative bodhicitta with ease as well?
Yeah. So the question is, how do you approach practice of relative bodhicitta without getting all tweaked up with dogmatic and feeling like you have to really work really hard at it, and how can it be kind of more easeful, something along those lines? That's a great question. And this is where the we talk about ultimate bodhicitta, and sometimes it's easy to kind of think of that, well, that's kind of like at the end. That's like the culmination of this whole bodhisattva career is, the realization of openness and such. And to impart kind of, if we look at Path of Heroes, it's interesting because the way Dzogchen Gyaltsen presents this kind of stuff, he introduces ultimate bodhicitta first, and the relative bodhicitta second, right? And so and you see in the practices in the back that there's a whole, golly, maybe 8 practices related to ultimate bodhicitta. Okay? And that, to my mind, is where it gets softer or easier. That right from the outset, there is, these instructions to consider everything like a dream. Right? To soften this self-grasping, which concretizes and reifies everything and makes everything so very, very real. And so all of our mental energy just kind of comes venturing down into this singular tight place, right? And so how do you move out of that into this more open and relaxed, spacious quality where everything is has a greater sense of ease, and the Bodhisattva path, rather than coming across as like some dogmatic drudgery, is actually full of light and joy, and that the commitment comes naturally from the heart and like that, yeah. So Dzogchen Gyaltsen, I think, is absolutely right in that he introduces this idea, for example, that everything is like a dream, and to consider everything like a dream, and then after meditation, as you come off the cushion and walk out, into the world, that you consider yourself as a child of illusion, right? And so that right from the very beginning, you're moving the mind towards this ultimate bodhicitta view, and that takes, like I say, it lightens the load right away, because there is a, so like in Path of Heroes, you're working along, you're developing more and more meditations on loving kindness, and this is all groovy, and then there's like cultivating compassion, and then comes Tonglen. Breathe in all of the negativity and suffering and negative karma of others.
And let it touch your heart.
Are you kidding me? And then you breathe out, all of your, all of your positive merit and everything, which sustains them and relieves them of their suffering. If you approach that in a heavy-handed manner, in a clumsy manner, it's like, there's that's just like, forget, I'm out of here. There's no way I can do that. But actually, if you really do touch into the compassion part, and as Olivia is saying, if it really touches your heart, then and it's the way the practice is framed, it's all riding on the breath, and through your meditation practices, you've gotten more comfortable and you're more at ease with the breath, and your cycles of breath are much longer than they used to be, and and you're just super relaxed, and you're breathing in all of the horribleness, all of it, and then you're breathing out all this white light of virtue and merit. That's, to my mind, like I say, it's like it's like grabbing the desk. If you don't have the ultimate bodhicitta training coming along in tandem, it's just like no way. It's just too hard from our ordinary reified place, where that suffering is so real, right? he has, Rinpoche has this wonderful practice, you know, where you, as you're considering the suffering of others, and you're also, you know, sort of marinating yourself in this idea that everything is like a dream. And if everybody realized that everything was a dream, all of that suffering is completely unnecessary. Right? You know, it's because we've concretized everything, and we concretize ourselves and others, and we've, you know, divorced ourselves from the non-dual state of being, that all of this happens. But none of that needed to happen. It's just all a very unfortunate mistake. So I don't know. I hope that's kind of helpful. But yeah, the dogmatic. See, that's the thing. You know, I mean, and Rinpoche is so great. I mean, he has composed all of these wonderful works, you know, for Westerners who, you know, have all sorts of hang-ups about religious traditions, and, you know, and have been burned, you know, in their childhood religion, you know, and I'm not going to point any fingers to any particular tradition, but, you know, many people are just, you know, have no truck with organized religion. Just forget about it, right? And you know, in this context, and in Path of Heroes, in his practice, Rinpoche talks about, you know, just relax. Maybe just kind of approach all of this like maybe you might perceive things completely differently if you just entertain this a little bit. You know, that actually reality will open up for you in what seem to be static forms will actually become different. I mean, he kind of just sort of eases us in, you know, because yeah, it's no fun, and it doesn't work for us if it smacks of being dogmatic, and the traditional teachings do, you know, and it's kind of for people, kind of my job, you know, for people like me and you who are trying to make this work, you know, in the modern context, is to try to finesse those concerns, because they're very real. You know, we all bring those to this, and you know, and there's not everything about the Buddhist tradition is, you know, always too palatable to the modern mind, particularly to the modern feminine mind. You know, there's a lot of Asian cultural misogyny things. There's one verse in the Bodhicaryavatara that I just skip. I just skip it every time because every woman in the audience will like stand up and walk out. You know, it's just like horrible. You know, so it's, why even go there? You know, it's not productive. So I just, like, in my gentle way, I just edit over that one, and when you read it, you'll know the one I'm talking about. You know, and it's so important to for the most part, to take everything at face value, and that it is incredibly valuable, particularly, like I say, the patience chapter, and if one can just kind of suspend judgment on some of these other aspects, and then, you know, not let that interfere with, you know, the amazingness that this opens up for us, is really important. Yeah. Anybody else?
Yeah. Mark?
Yes, Sheila.
Yeah. Thank you for that question and answer, because I've been thinking about that lately, about we get bogged down in efforting, you know, and there's too much aspiration and effort. And we got to remember that we and our efforts and our aspirations are all kind of shunyata. We got to remember, put it in some kind of context. So thank you for that. And my question is, speaking of shunyata, a couple places in your shared slides, you use the translation open luminosity for shunyata. And I was wondering if that, if the Tibetan translation is using a different term other than Tongpa, and is it using one of those more luminosity kinds of terms like usul or something like that?
Yeah, great question. The way Tulku Orgyen talks about it, he says there's shunya, right? But there's more to it than shunya. Mm-hmm. There's ta. Shunya ta. And the ta is the luminous cognizance of the openness, shunyata, right? That that is to say, it's not, it's just not space. It's just not emptiness. It's so often translated as emptiness, which is just like a huge turnoff, right? Who wants to go there? It's like ick, and so openness is a much more, and openness is what Rinpoche uses consistently. He avoids emptiness almost always. But then the luminous, and this is actually kind of a little bit inflected by higher teachings, I'll admit that, where, particularly in the Tibetan tradition, and sometimes it's explicit in the Tibetan tradition, and they'll actually use, in Tibetan, it's for shunyata, it's tongpa nid, or this tongpa is the open empty aspect, and the nid is the reflexive awareness quality. But sometimes they're actually into the Tibetan even more explicit about it, and they'll say tong sao.
Yeah, there's the luminosity. Yeah,
and tong sao together as a bound compound. And so that's the empty and the luminosity together. But you don't actually, and it's really nice that they do that, because then it's like clear and explicit. But the ta in Sanskrit, or the nid in Tibetan, gets you to the same place. It infuses that luminous, that cognizance, which expresses itself experientially as luminosity.
Great, thank you.
Or clarity. Tong sao. Yeah, they do all sorts of things with Saul. They do. Anyway, that's beyond. Anybody else? No? Yes, sir.
In terms of this, the idea of the Bodhisattva way, and if you compare it with the Lotus trilogy, how does those two kind of pathways kind of overlap, in terms of, because it's talking about the similar aspects of what do you call it, freeing yourself out from what we've been taught of, how to live reality. So how do they compare to each other?
Your question really should be put to Mr. Hugh Joswick.
Have you taken the
No, I enrolled, but I didn't take the class.
Yeah, because Hugh is teaching this class, this Bodhicaryavatara class, and he teaches those trilogies.
Okay.
So I'm not really the expert.
To read the books is so difficult to
Yeah,
get
yeah.
it, but in class, you have the text, you have direct experience
Right.
practices, and you have chanting, Sambhava, just the experience of that calming effect of the sound, and something comes together in a way that if I just read the text, I would be completely lost.
Yeah, like I say, I'm not the best one to answer. Great question. I'm sorry, I'm not qualified to answer it very well.
Yeah, I'm taking the class with Professor Yu for meditation.
You can corner him. Excellent. He'll love it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, we're kind of running late. I don't know. Let me just, as a dedication or merit, read from Shantideva's dedication. Just these last few verses. And now, as long as space endures, as long as there are beings to be found, may I continue likewise to remain, to drive away the sorrows of the world. The pains and sorrows of all wandering beings, may they ripen wholly upon myself, and may the virtuous company of bodhisattvas always bring about the happiness of beings. May the Dharma, the only cure for sorrow, source of every bliss and happiness, be blessed with wealth, upheld with veneration, and throughout a vast continuance of time endure. And now to Manju Gosha or Manjushri I prostrate, whose kindness is the wellspring of my good intent, and to my virtuous friends I also bow, whose inspiration gave me strength to grow. Thank you all very much for coming. Appreciate it very much. If you wanted, if you have the strength and the endurance to overcome, the shoulds and the woulds and iota, then you're very welcome to take the class.
Mark, does it start this coming week?
This coming week is the break week, right?
Okay.
So it's the week after that. Yeah.
And you said the meditation in the morning is an integral part of it?
Well, you can take them separately. I've offering the meditation classes myself, largely for my own benefit. Okay, because it's so easy. This is very profound material, actually, and deeply revolutionary to our ordinary way of thinking. And you can read the text, and it just doesn't land the same way as if you're doing practices or contemplation, sometimes just on the verses of the text itself, that allow you just to stop and settle more deeply with the material, and to actually spend some time, doing loving kindness meditation and compassion meditation, spending some chunks of time doing that, then for me, it works it just allows it to go deeper. But it's perfectly fine to just take a class all by itself. But I just think it's really important to, because Westerners, all of us, we're so smart, and we process information and we make connections and so on very, very quickly. But it doesn't go, as Olivia was saying, it doesn't touch the heart. And that's what, for this real transformation to occur, that needs to happen. And for that to happen, I feel, you need to slow down a lot, and really work let the material work on you, and really, have a much deeper conversation with the material for it to really work. To actually, touch the heart and open the heart in the way that it's intended. Otherwise, it just becomes another intellectual plaything, and that doesn't, that's fun, but it doesn't have any real transformative power. So, I apologize for all the technical things at the beginning, but we finally got it. Anyway, thank you all so much. Have a wonderful evening and an enjoyable summer.
Thanks, Mark.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mark.
Sure enough.
When you think about it, all this technology is kind of like levitating. If you went back to Shantideva's time, if they saw it, they would think it was.
That's true. Bye-bye now.
It's like Star Trek, right? We stand in there.